Good morning, everybody. It's Michael Davis from Roxhill Media here, and welcome to the latest of our Roxhill webinars with senior business journalists. Before I introduce our guest this morning, also welcome to our new format on Zoom. For those of you who've been with us on the Livestorm platform this year, it should all be the same. There's a chat room. So if you've got questions, please fire them through there. But anyway, welcome this morning to our guest, Chris Newlands. Chris is the business and money editor of the newspaper. And many of you will know him from his previous roles, where he was editor of FTFM at the Financial Times for a long time, and more recently, editor of Financial News. Chris, welcome this morning. And you joined the back in the spring. Other things were happening in the spring, weren't they? What was it like joining the newspaper just as we went in the pandemic hit and everybody went into lockdown?
Yeah, morning, Michael. Thanks for inviting me, and hello to everyone. It was unusual. So I had the job sorted before everything kicked off. So I guess one of the first things I was worried about was whether the job would still be there. As I joined on April the 22nd, and by that point, we'd heard of The Guardian making cuts, the BBC, so one of the things was, I was glad to start, get my feet under the table. But I've been in the office precisely 3 times, which is, it's tricky when you're starting a new job, particularly when you're editor of a desk or a section, because you need to kind of, have a drink with people and shake their hands. And, it's very hard to do that on Zoom, and it's very hard to do that remotely. But so far so good. But it has been a very unusual time. I mean, we've been very reliant on these kind of platforms. I have calls every day with the team. Zoom have had a very good lockdown, their profits are up massively. So they've done well, and we are very reliant on them.
But I would contend your profession has had a very good lockdown as well, in the sense that if I'd said to you this time last year that when you get your feet under the table, it's the kitchen table, and you'd be putting a newspaper together in exactly the same form as it was from home, you probably have told me that I was living in cloud cuckoo land.
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, the amazing thing is it can be done. There are 1 or 2 people going in, a few of the production people go into the office because they need the big screens, and they find it very difficult to do at home. But yeah, it can be done. And, without the technology, I dread to think if this pandemic hit even 3 years ago, would we have been able to cope in the way we have? Perhaps 5 years ago, I doubt it. 10 years ago, definitely not. But yeah, it's I have been in this house for a long time, and I can't wait to get back to the office, to be honest.
Anyway, so you are at home, and you're with the team virtually. What's the practicalities of putting together a business section every day remotely?
So we have a news meeting at 9:30 every day, but this is a meeting for the whole newspaper. So I go into that, pitch story ideas. We lean on PA copy and Reuters. So we have a look around, see what's the big stories of the day, what our own reporting has uncovered, and we pitch those to Ollie Duff, the main editor. What he particularly likes, he grabs and he takes that and he'll put that in the news pages, so they go further up front. And I kind of know the stories that he might like. It's the one which has a bit of a wider reach, which is a bit quirky, which is obviously well-known names. But there's lots of business stories that are, you know, the nuts and bolts, that will obviously stay within our pages, company results, and whatnot. So yeah, and then so we have the main news meeting with all of the editors across the paper, and then afterwards the money and business team, we just have a quick chat about how our pages are going to look, who's going to do some writing, what we're going to chase down, you know, and the stories for the next day. So yeah.
You mentioned that the business stories that catch Ollie Duff's eye tend to be quirky. Well, you could say perhaps the Eye is a quirky newspaper in its own right. Can you tell us a little bit about what the Eye is about and what is its approaches to the business agenda?
Yeah, so, you know, traditionally, if you pick up the Eye, you'll see it traditionally has had a kind of a bite-size format. That is changing because we are doing now a lot more longer form pieces, but it's about kind of, you know, it's born out of this quick news demand. But I think how now the readership has got far more loyal, we are going for longer pieces. But yeah, it is, I think what Ollie would like a lot is good news stories, particularly now. I think we have a particularly a young audience. I asked for the stats before I arrived here. So we're most popular as a paper, this is not the business desk in particular, most popular among 25 to 34-year-olds. Obviously for the business pages, you expect that to skew older. And then for the whole paper, we're least popular among 18 to 24-year-olds. So, you know, the very young reader is not our core reader, but those in the 25 to 34-year-old bracket, they are leaning on us. 3/4 of readers are on mobile. But this kind of, it becomes more desktop based when you're looking at our more loyal readers. Anyway, what our readers want is stories that they can have a bit of fun with, I think, and that's what Ollie's always got his eye
on. And it was this time last year that the Eye was acquired by Daily Mail and General Trust. Yep. So when you do go into the office, you're in Derry Street along with Standard and the Mail titles. But presumably that's given the Eye the sort of stability that was perhaps lacking over previous years. How do you fit into the sort of general stable of titles at DMGT?
Yeah, so I've been into the Derry Street office. I went there obviously for my interview, and I've been in 3 times since. So we are kind of tucked away on the ground floor. I think that might change. So what's happening now quite quickly is the support services for the whole group we're kind of leaning on those far more. So HR, IT. So in that sense, we are fully amalgamated within the company. In terms of kind of news sense, and I think the owners, this is obviously I've been told this by Ollie, the owners are quite keen for the Eye to maintain its identity, what they bought. They don't want to turn it into the Mail. They don't want to turn the website into the Mail online. They're very keen to have that difference. Yeah. Which personally, for a lot of the journalists who shipped over, they're very pleased with that. I've had very little. I've obviously, because I joined in April, so by that point, the deal was done. Just the formalities were going through. So it's difficult for me to say what the differences have been. But I know from talking to Ollie that the new owners haven't kind of put any pressure on what we should do and kind of the leaning that stories should have. You know, one of the things actually that they've said is that they want the business and money desk to flourish a bit more. So this is one of the reasons why they asked me to join. They want to get some kind of more scoops, kind of harder hitting stories, someone who kind of knows a bit more about the city. So obviously from my time at Financial News, you know, that's very, very helpful. And at FTFM, yeah, you know, I kind of got to know the city inside out. So I am bringing some of that to our readers. But, you know, you have to consider, I think I was looking at the stats myself, I find it of interest. So 85% of our readership is outside London. That's for print, and online, 76% of readers are outside London. Obviously, London is the biggest base, so that's an important thing to think of. And I think obviously, particularly for the business and money desk, I think we'll find, particularly on the business side, that our readership will skew towards the city and London.
Yeah. It's interesting, just picking up the BI, and yes, it's sort of designed for people on the move and for quick consumption, but still, your pagination is nearly 60 pages, and so sitting down with the eye, it's a big read in its own right. Just how are you approaching? Is there a way that you're actually trying to approach the business agenda? Are you trying to give a snappy overview for sort of the young professionals, or are you just trying to cover the whole market as best you can?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, we're trying to cover the whole market as best we can, but we do want to bring business stories to life. I mean, there's lots of great business journalists out there, and you know, there is a way of writing a business story which is dull and doesn't kind of, won't be as well read as one where you just quickly find a little nub of something in that story, and that becomes the lead. Obviously, at the moment, a lot of people, for ages, people were just interested in workplace stories because their whole lives had changed. Everyone was working from home. People wanted to know, can I move out of London now? Will my company allow me to go and live by the sea in Margate? And, you know, I could sell if you're lucky enough to have a flat, you can sell it and then buy a house. You know, we sensed whenever we did a story on workplace stuff, it just, the numbers are enormous. You know, that obviously might die down come next year. I think we're going to see, including us, we're going to be going back into the office. We started going back in actually just before the second lockdown. The company, I think ideally they'd like us to be back in at least half of the time, but that's obviously stopped. And now with Christmas coming, I think it will be January that we all go back. But I think it will be the same for our readers too.
Yes, no, I get a sense that once the vaccination program starts to snowball, then things will come back to life in the first months of next year. Anyway, let's hope that trajectory
going to tier 3. I don't know if you had that.
Is that that's just come through, has it?
I spoke to our political editor yesterday. So apparently, there's a strong chance from the 16th of December that that's going to happen.
Oh, right. Well, I'm in tier 3 already down in Kent, so
okay, right. There you go.
But I've also broken my leg, so I couldn't get to the pub even if I wanted to. So,
well, that's another story.
Chris, just tell us a little bit about your team and how you operate. You know, compared to some of the large business desks of the other nationals, you run a very tight ship, and you bring in a lot of freelance help, as well as some of the copy from PA and Reuters. Just how does that sort of potpourri of sources work on a daily basis?
Yeah, so as you rightly said, we do rely quite a lot on PA and Reuters copy, and you know, we use that for the stories which you know, are the bedrock of most newspapers and online sites. And then we have our team. So we have so it's myself. There's Alice, Lizzie, she was the former Money and Business editor. She's now gone freelance, but we have her on retainer, so she writes for us quite a lot of copy. We have a new Money editor who's going to start in January. I can't tell you who that is yet, but she's signed a contract, so she'll be starting. And then we lean on David Parsley, who's our city editor. He actually was the launch editor of City AM. And then we use Laurie Havelock as well, who's like he's kind of a gun for hire that the Eye uses, but he works for us a lot on the business desk. So yeah, I mean, because we do have a small team, we do rely on freelance, and obviously, you know, there's a lot of journalists out there at the moment who used to work in-house and now have gone freelance. So the number of opportunities to get stuff from freelancers has increased significantly. But yeah, our bedrock of stuff is will be PA and Reuters, and then obviously the stories we do for the money section, the Reuters and PA wouldn't cover that. So the money section at the weekend, we are all writing pieces for that. And, you know, I can tell you now that if everyone wants to know about inheritance tax. You write a story about inheritance tax, it goes bananas. I did one the other day about, so due to the COVID-19, grandparents are helping out their grandkids more. And I was given this piece of research. It was actually done by a law firm. And I think it got something like 200,000 clicks. So yeah, inheritance tax, wills, people like reading about that. Death and taxes, I guess.
Death and taxes. Well, there's going to be a lot about wealth tax over the coming months. And I guess that is, the inheritance tax does fit that bill as well. So you've got the big money section at the weekend. Are there any other sort of set pieces during the week that you gear up for?
Yeah, so on Wednesdays as well, we have a big money section too. So we have, so Lizzie is helping massively with that. So we have like a My Money section, basically, where we interview people and they tell us about their financial situation, and we kind of break it down and they get some advice. So on basically the money sections, Wednesdays and Saturdays, and then obviously the business section runs every day throughout that. Obviously there's no edition on Sunday, but that, yeah, we kind of longer pieces for money and breaking news for the business section.
And just looking forward to next year, presumably, well, there's no buts about it, but the impact of the pandemic and the impact of Brexit are just going to dominate the agenda. Do you feel as though people are just getting tired of this sort of this constant heavy hitting sort of Armageddon of news in a way?
Yeah, it's well, you know, readership numbers have gone up, you know, significantly during the pandemic. People they do want information, but I think you're right. People are a bit bored of bad news. You know, having Brexit going on at the moment and COVID is, for some people, that's just far too much to take. I think we can handle one or the other, but you know, for journalists, it's refreshing to be writing about something else, which isn't Brexit. Obviously, no one expected quite the devastation financially, you know, of people's lives that's happened, but it's given people something else to think about. But for next year, I think we're going to have to think carefully about how we cover it. As I said, the Eye readers and the editor, he's very much of the, you know, the reasoning that we must have some kind of good news stories. And, you know, they are out there. At the weekend, I was given a piece of research that, you know, the number of new companies being launched is a record high. You know, that's actually quite refreshing. It's very brave to see. You know, there are some reasons for that, of course. People are opening companies to do with PPE and kind of sanitizers and hygiene. And some people are on furlough. They've had time to think about what they could do next. And then obviously some people have lost their jobs, so they want to do new things. But anyway, there are some good news stories out there, you know, and we would like those for sure.
Well, Nicola was in very early with a question asking about your approach to the entrepreneurs agenda, and presumably with your young demographic, sort of entrepreneurial sort of startup stories chime well with them.
Definitely. And we have a section on a Monday, which is the 30-second interview, which Alice is leading, but those are with people who have launched businesses during the pandemic. And, you know, there's some great stories. We'll see how those pan out. You know, obviously in any market, launching a new business is very difficult. But we have a particular section for that on a Monday. But we are always interested in stories to do with people launching new businesses. Obviously, for various reasons, commentating on stories. I mean, we write the big stories on GDP and unemployment. And obviously, it'd be great to have some color within those stories from people who are kind of bucking the trend of the long lines of unemployment queues.
Chris, presumably you were still at the Financial Times during the financial crash 10 years ago. Is there anything that you from your experience back then that's going to colour the way that you approach sort of the ramifications of the crisis next year?
Yeah, I guess, you know, you learn that things will get better. So you don't want to go too crazy with your coverage. I think the main difference back then, actually, I mean, it was very much a banking story. Actually, when I was at the FT, we just launched something called Ignites Europe, which I was the editor of at the time. And, you know, it was just the worst time, so we thought, to launch anything reliant on subscription revenue. We wanted banks to pay, asset managers to pay. But it worked. And, you know, things do get better. So the one thing I've learned from reporting on that is, you know, things will improve. The difference this time is it's affecting everyone. And, you know, who are the villains this time? It was the bankers last time. You know, who are the villains this time? I guess it's the politicians for maybe not doing enough in terms of testing, you know, but it's a virus. It's something that affects us all. And, you know, it's an unknown. I would say that it's an unknown. I've never lived through anything like this, and I'm sure you haven't either. But it's an exciting time to be writing about anything, to be honest, but in particular, the business world.
Yeah, but it will undoubtedly, and with Brexit as well, involve a huge restructuring of our economy. And I should imagine you're very focused on those emerging parts of the economy that do stand a chance of picking up some of the slack from pharmaceuticals, tech, sort of emerging parts of financial services. Those would come under your banner of sort of good news, I presume.
Yes, definitely. Tech is a good one. Yeah, I mean, you know, if I think about the city, which I know a lot about, I mean, there will be loads of good news stories there. But there'll be ones of, like, you know, which big bank has signed up to the big skyscraper in Canary Wharf for another 10 years. You know, those stories will be of interest in a way that they wouldn't have been under normal circumstances, because that's a show of faith the UK economy, and particularly to London. I mean, the one thing I kind of realized being on a national is just the fascination all of our readers have with property. You know, everyone has some story with property in a way that they don't with maybe stocks or bonds, you know, through their pension. But people are really fascinated by property, and I think there will be some very good news stories there and some, you know, some bad ones. I mean, what's happening now with this kind of mini property boom, I don't think anyone could have expected that at such a dire time. So, you know, will the government continue with its stamp duty holiday at the end of March? Lots of people are hoping so. Lots of people who are in a chain now who are hoping to make use of this this kind of tax break. But yeah, it's caused a big spike in property prices, and you know, we can't get enough of property stories. To cut a long story short.
Yeah. And presumably, with your city days, you particularly at FTFM, you would have been covering the sort of ethical investment and environmental sort of focus of investment. Now, it seems to me that there's been a big sea change over the past year or two in that space, and that impact investing has really become sort of front and central of a lot of the ways that finance in particular is approaching this thing. I should imagine that chimes well with your readership.
Yeah, definitely, you're right. As I said, the younger reader, it makes me sound so odd to talk about a younger reader, but the younger readers do care about this in a way that the generations before them just didn't. And not in a serious way. And they, you know, if you're in the age bracket of 24, 35, you might act with your feet and your wallet. And that there is a lot of demand for stories to do with social finance, ESG. You know, obviously we would write it, I would cover that in a very different way to how I would cover that at the FT, but it's still massively important. I mean, when I was covering it at the FT, you know, it was just someone would have a business card, and on one side they'd be head of UK operations, and on the other side it would say ESG head. You know, it was a job that someone had as a share. You know, no one took it seriously. They had it on their business cards, but and now you have people who are doing this job permanently and solely, and simply because money can be made from it.
There's a related question from Jack here. So do you think philanthropy will become a topic you'll be keen to look at more going forward, and the positive role business can play in society?
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting topic, actually. It's one that it's a really interesting one, because mainly because I think our readers are fascinated by the characters involved in this, because usually if you're giving money away, then you've got lots of money, and people are fascinated with people with lots of money. There was obviously the big story yesterday about the founder of Twitter, who is going to be giving millions of dollars away, and that, I know that story did very well. Yes, in short, that's an area that I would like to do more of. It's quite an opaque area, so you know, thinking of, you know, with my other kind of as a journalist, I think there's some possible digging to be done with those stories too.
No, we're not great at it in this country either, so perhaps we could do better. Just moving on, as just to wrap up, it'd be very helpful just for our guests this morning, just to hear a little bit about what they can do to help you and your team. What are the specific areas where the comms world can help you and your team put together the section every day?
Yeah, I mean, one thing we would like to do more of is speak to the big hitters in the market. So if you represent these people, you know, the CEOs, because we're traditionally we've relied on PA copy. Obviously, they would put their copy together and the quotes would be included. But the problem with doing it that way is we miss out on the follow-up stories, of of course. So we would like to hear from the big hitters from the FTSE 100 companies, obviously, and FTSE 250, but also big hitters in their own field. So, that's been difficult, really, because a lot of the journalism where people enjoy meeting face to face, that's been taken away. But actually, good interviews can be had on Zoom, or there are other platforms out there. And so, interviews with kind of big cheeses is, I think, will be very helpful for us. We can't get enough research. We find that very useful, because obviously we don't want to get caught in product selling. We don't want to sell your products for you. So if you can basically distance yourself some way from that, that's very helpful. I find it very useful. We do a lot of market stories. So, I get a lot of comment to do with markets and market moves. I could do with more of that. Just sent to my inbox. And then on one day I might need it. It's not that I will use it every day, but stuff to do with company moves in terms of markets. So if HSBC's had a bad day, whatever, and someone who could have some expertise on that, would be great to receive a short 4 or 5 line comment that I may or may not use.
That's all very helpful. You did mention data, and actually Isabel had a question about that. How do you feel about data stories? Useful to have robust data to back up stories, or would you rather have case studies, people to interview?
Both, to be honest. But yeah, data is for me, I feel much more comfortable when I've got data, because then I know I've got a story. So it's much more difficult to do a story which is, well, it's not difficult, but you don't know. It feels a bit more contrived if you're, I did a story today. Sir Jim Ratcliffe, he is obviously moving his 4x4 company. He was going to build a factory in Wales, and now he's building the cars out in France. And so for that, I went and spoke to a couple of key Remainers, Gina Miller and Ros Altman, and they gave me some quotes, and I put together a story. So that's a story where I speak to people, and sometimes it can feel a bit unfair on the people, because I've contrived this story. But when I've got the data, I feel a lot more comfortable that these numbers are showing a pattern, and I can then comfortably report on that, or one of the team can.
And presumably, when you're referring to data, you prefer it when someone's looked at an issue and gone beneath the surface and come up with hard reference points, rather than the 9 out of 10 cats type approach.
Yeah, because the 9 out of 10 cats thing, I'll often, it depends what the people want, but often it's no more than a nib, is it? So that's a short story you're going to get out of it, and that's where it could be fun, and then it might catch the editor's eye, but it's never going to become a meaty story. But yeah, as I was talking about the story to do with the number of new companies launching, that was a law firm who did a lot of number crunching for me, and allowed me to go off and interview people and make kind of the story interesting. But they did a lot of the heavy lifting for me, so that was really useful.
We've just got a couple more quick questions before we finish up. Can Chris explain how the balance works between Reuters and PA's sourced stories and those that people might pitch directly?
So we probably, if PA have done a story, I've got to be honest, between PA and Reuters, we will probably take the PA one. It's just written for a newspaper audience. They've got very good writers. Reuters tend to write things, they just want it up fast, quick. And obviously for a newspaper, we don't necessarily have, it's not so important for us. We need like a nicely worded, rounded piece, rather than, that's something that Bloomberg would be more interested in for its, readers who are making money second by second. So yeah, PA would be, we probably favor PA copy over Reuters, but obviously what I'm looking for from the team is scoops. So, obviously the Jim Ratcliffe story was out, and PA had done that story, but we needed to move it forward. So the obvious thing is to get some reaction. So that's what from the team, that's what we will get. We're kind of looking for scoops from the team, and then kind of peppering the foundations of Reuters and PA.
And a quick one from Holly, going back to the tech agenda. Do international stories interest the eye if there's impact on the UK? Also Definitely. On businesses turning to sustainable practices, the circular economy. Is there demand for this story?
Yes and yes. We cover a lot of international stories. We have international pages in the eye, so there might be some occasions where they'll take a business story of ours and put it in their pages if we haven't got room. So there's two places they might appear, but I'm very interested in international stories. I mean, we do have to convince the reader that it's of interest. The short answer is yes. And sorry, what was the second question?
Well, there were two parts to that. It was sustainable practice in the circular economy. Presumably that fits in with your focus on the environmental agenda.
Yeah, exactly that. And as I said, with our kind of focus on a younger audience than a lot of other newspapers, that's of interest.
And yes, no, so Eunice has asked another one about ESG, and finally one from Nita. Are you open to adding expert voices from new contacts to your stories? Do you want bullet points on their proposed comments, or are you happy to have a background telephone chat to learn more about them, their company's views? I guess that's what a tricky one for PRs is, offering commentators around an agenda, because so much of it is timing. They need to be in your inbox at the point that you need that insight.
Yeah, and that's why I think there is a use. I don't know what PRs think about this, actually, to be honest, whether they think this is a waste of their time, but sending stuff on a regular basis that may not get used. I mean, I guess it can be, I can imagine it could be quite tiresome if you're putting this work in and then the rewards are quite few. But I find that very useful, and also it builds up a kind of a confidence that these companies have been around. If you've been getting emails from someone for a year, they're still going. That's useful, and especially in this time where a lot of businesses are failing. Commentary is key. We need commentary. We need PRs to be bold with the comments that they get their people to write, because they need to add something to the story, because you can't just have a commentator saying something which I could write. It needs to be something which is exciting, something with a bit of flourish, nice examples. Some people are very good at this and some people aren't.
It was a point very well made by your successor at Financial News last week. Shruti was saying just not enough PRs think about the reader, and will they really want to read what people are saying?
Harsh but fair.
Harsh but fair. Finally, I always enjoy reading the Eye. I think it's a fresh and distinct paper. One of the features about it is quite visual as well. Does that extend to the business coverage as well?
Definitely, yeah. I mean, the thing, I think you'll find this with most business editors, we find it very difficult on the picture side to do much more than a white man. All the CEOs tend to be white men. So we are we're kind of desperate for great photos. And I think when you're dealing with an audience like ours, you can be. So we've done some great, we do kind of standalone picture stories, and we've done some great stuff with like small businesses that make kind of soap, and they've sent us this great picture. You know, we do focus on that, the visual. You're right to bring that up, because we do have a slot for it. We have something called the briefing as well, where we break down a story. It's kind of a Q&A, and that has a big picture attached to it. So yesterday, there was what did I do on yesterday? Oh yeah, British American Tobacco. So it was just a results story. So their results were going to be better than they thought, but the reason is because South Africa has ended a ban on cigarettes early. So they unusually had banned cigarettes to fight COVID. So obviously for British American Tobacco, this is bad news, but they ended that ban early, so they've updated their forward numbers. And this story just needed breaking down. And so it's a nice way we can do it in this briefing way. And then cigarettes, you can have interesting pictures. And so that was the perfect story for that slot. So we do think, so I put that in that slot because I was thinking about the visuals, to be honest.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, Chris, thank you very much for your time this morning. It's been great insight into the challenges that you've faced these past 9 months, and I hope you get to meet your team at some point. But it is extraordinary how we've all got to grips with the new normal, and whatever happens, things aren't going to be the same, are they? But can I offer you just this little slot to make a pitch to our guests this morning in the comms world? You know, why should they think of you and DI if they've got a good story?
That's a good question. Why should they? Because, yeah, what can I say that's Oliver Shah wouldn't say? Look, we've got big readership, and it's growing all the time. And I think you'll pick up an audience that you won't necessarily pick up from other places. And also, I think we're nice to deal with. So yeah, please pitch to me.
No, exactly. But it's a good news story. I'm delighted the Eye has found a stable home and its future is assured. I think it's great they've hired a heavy-hitting city journalist to front up their business coverage. And you do speak to a quirky but distinct audience that I think a lot of people will want to communicate to. So anyway, all power to your elbow, and thank you very much for joining us this morning.
No, my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Cheers, Chris.
Cheers. Bye-bye.